And a happy Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in to this Christmas week edition of your extended forecast. A few things to go over as we go into Christmas, but overall, a very uneventful stretch of weather, other than the fact that we may be flirting with some records as we go into Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So we'll go over the latest, but go ahead and write it down and get it in your head that it is going to be a warm Christmas. I know many of us were wishing for a white Christmas. I guess that got lost in communication when going to tell Santa Claus that. But let's go over your December rainfall first and foremost, because now we do have our totals from last Friday, where we didn't really add much on top of the rain that we received on Thursday. So all in all, so far in the month of December, just over 2 inches of rain, just shy of 2¼ of an inch of rain. But it does put us almost exactly 2 inches below what we typically see on average in December. It looked like we were running at a good pace at the very beginning of the month. Take a look at that. We popped up into the a bit wet category as of the second day of the month. But ever since then, whatever we've seen in the way of rainfall hasn't amounted to too much, and it's been a steady decline where now we hover somewhere in the dry category, believe it or not, even though we've been talking about our fair share of rain chances during the month of December. But it did take a little bit, but we finally saw some improvement on our drought monitor. As of last Thursday's update, we did see most areas taken out of a severe drought in central Georgia. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but I still want to touch on what you see down here, this area of an extreme drought and surrounded by areas of a severe drought. Those areas were in an exceptional drought as of about a week or two ago, but we've seen that steadily improve as well, as they did get more rainfall from one of our widespread rainmakers as of about a week or two ago. And we do see that patch of that red color, the extreme drought, right there down mainly in northern Florida, but creeping into southwest Georgia. That actually expanded as far north as southern Crisp County at one point, but we've definitely seen that area recede down to the south, and now most of central Georgia that was once crowded in this orange color is now just crowded in this tan color. So most areas hovering in a moderate drought. Milledgeville, Macon, Warner Robins, going to Dublin, Wrightsville, Eastman. It's just our westernmost counties that are still within severe drought criteria. So areas like Taylor County, Macon County, Peach County, Crawford County, and some portions of Upson County and southwestern Houston County. So those areas need the rain a little bit more than the rest of central Georgia. I don't imagine that we really have anything in the way of widespread rainmakers that could dump about 1 inch, 2 or 3 of rain in the near future. So it does look like these conditions are going to stay put for the remainder of the year. If not, maybe even get a little bit worse. We may see that severe drought expand just as quick as it did shrink down in nature. So the headlines are going to be a warm up into Christmas, mostly dry besides a few sprinkles. We'll go over what times in your short-term forecast and in your long-term forecast have the best likelihood of maybe a select few areas getting lucky and catching a very brief 5 to 10 minute light shower. But our next cool down is going to be at the beginning of next week. It's not going to pop up on your 7-day forecast, but I will break down what we are anticipating as we go into the beginning of next week and those final last couple of days of 2025. Here's a walk around the quad. Plenty of blue sky now. We had our fair share of cloud cover in the forecast earlier in downtown Macon, Perry, down at the Georgia National Fairgrounds, and in Warner Robins. That cloud cover has fallen apart or moved off to the north. I'm not really seeing any signs of it up to the north here in our downtown Macon sky cam. So it's a story of completely clear and blue sky that is settling into the forecast. That should be the name of the game throughout the rest of today. So along with that, we don't see as much of a temperature difference as we did, say, early this morning. All of your numbers hovering somewhere in the mid to the upper 50s. No one quite up to that 60-degree mark just yet. 57, 58, 59 at the warmest down in Rochelle, and at the lowest we do spot a 54 up in Sandersville in Washington County. But areas over to the east were a whole lot cooler than, say, areas over to the west as of this morning, because those areas to the west, they did have plenty of widespread cloud cover that was fairly dense in nature. So the areas that had crystal clear skies, along with this east and northeastern orientation with the winds, ushering in a slightly cooler air mass. And you can still see that it's pretty profound up there as you get into upstate South Carolina. These areas saw their fair share of 40s this morning and some wind chills even lower. We even saw a 39 pop up in Eastman. So some of those areas have seen more of a temperature increase from early this morning into this afternoon now, but most areas over to the west still sitting around the same temperatures that they have been hovering at throughout most of the morning in light of those cloudy skies. Here's a look at the current temperatures all across the eastern United States. Much cooler up to the north and the northwest and northeast of us, where we do spot some scattered 40s, 40 degrees at the lowest up there in Indianapolis. But as you go down towards the south, down here in the southeast United States, going over into the southern plains, that's where we see a good mix of 50s and 60s. Even some 70s, 72 in Houston, 70 over in Laredo, and a 76 at the warmest down in Orlando. I imagine they're probably pretty close to the 80-degree mark the closer and closer you get down to Miami on the southern end of the peninsula. Now here's a look at your winds, which are a factor. If you go back to that quad view we just showed you, you can still see the flags over the west gate of the Georgia National Fairgrounds blowing away from the camera. So what that means is the camera was facing over towards the west, so that breeze coming from east over to west. And obviously that is the direction you see on these wind arrows, mainly an eastern orientation, but maybe a slight northeast component to these winds. Regardless, these winds are sustained anywhere from about 7 to maybe even 12 miles per hour, but the occasional gust is what you'll want to be informed about. 24-mile-per-hour gust up here in Macon and an 18-mile-per-hour gust down in both Americus and Cordele. That will continue to be possible throughout the next couple of hours. I do expect the winds to get a brief subsiding as we go into this afternoon, but the good news is now all of your feels-like temperatures are above the threshold to where that wind would be impacting them in the negative direction. So your feels-like temperatures, very accurate of what the actual numbers do read, scattered about the mid and the upper 50s, just like we saw on your actual temperature map. So going into this afternoon, I've been saying it all morning long that you need to soak it up while it lasts, because believe it or not, this afternoon is forecasted to be the coolest day of the entire next week ahead that we do have. Mostly clear skies, and those breezy conditions will continue to linger. But like I said, maybe a bit of a downtick, only gusts up to 20 miles per hour as opposed to 25 miles per hour as we go throughout the rest of the afternoon, but still maintaining that east and northeasterly direction. If you go ahead and flashback to maybe the end of last week when we were talking about it in the extended forecast, what is causing this setup right now of some slightly cooler numbers is a bit of a wedge setup. So that happens anytime you get northeasterly winds in your forecast, and that's normally courtesy of some high pressure up to the north and the northeast. It ushers in that slightly cooler and slightly drier air, and it kind of wedges up against the Appalachian Mountains and kind of creeps into central Georgia. So that is what we were talking about. The passage of a frontal boundary has created that. It was a very weak frontal boundary of the later hours yesterday, but that is creating a bit of a brief cool down for the beginning of the holiday week so far. But if this is going to be the coolest day of the week ahead that we have, a high temperature of 63 degrees, that's still 3 degrees above average. So we are still forecasting a good stretch of above average high temperatures. But if this is the lowest that we get, it obviously is emphasizing how much above average that we are going to be as we go throughout the rest of the holiday week. But here's a look at your December high temperatures, which yesterday marked the 5th day in a row that we have been above average. So like I said, we started out the month of December with about a two-week stretch of seeing some below average numbers, plenty of blue boxes scattered about the 1st through the 16th of December. And we have 2 days that were exactly on par with average, both going back into December 10th with a high temperature of 62 and December 14th where the high temperature dipped down to 61. Well, now your average high temperature sits at 60 degrees flat, and last Tuesday didn't exactly meet that mark because the average high was still 61 at that point. Now it has dipped down a little bit farther, but all of these numbers over the last 5 days have been above average, indicating that these past two frontal boundaries, they have not really done a good job of ushering in some substantially cooler air like the one we had at the beginning of the work week last week. That was a big Arctic air mass that ushered in, and that's why we had high temperatures somewhere in the mid 40s, and we paired those up with some pretty breezy conditions. But 5 days in a row that we have recorded some above average high temperatures, and now looking at it, I guess my math is wrong. This is 7 above average days that we've seen in the month of December, creeping closer and closer to the total of 12 days that have been below average for this month so far. And I do expect today and the rest of the week to start to clock some of those red boxes. So we are going to see an abundance of red as we head towards the back half of December. Here's a look at your hour-by-hour warm-up, which continues to fluctuate, eventually making the climb to the 60-degree mark as we go just past lunchtime and throughout the rest of the afternoon. Somewhere in the low 60s, peaking at 63 degrees, maybe even seeing a couple 64s and a 65 or two. But then as we progress into the evening, still a pretty pleasant feel out there. 61 down to 57 as you roll into the beginning of dinner time. And if you have any plans this evening, maybe going to look at Christmas lights, any plans that you have for family that is coming into town, then of course it is going to feel like a pleasant atmosphere. You may just need some light layering as you are venturing outside, but all in all, I think that the evenings aren't going to be too chilly whatsoever, especially compared to the stretch of weather that we have been encountering. And for maybe the in-laws or extended family coming into town from farther up to the north, this is going to feel like a tropical retreat for them. Here's a look at the satellite and radar picture. Still picking up on some cloud cover, but it's mainly to the north and the northwest of us. Otherwise, we are crystal clear in central Georgia, and that's the case across much of the southeast. We're not going to really have any big-time weather systems impacting the state of Georgia, let alone any of our neighboring states over the next couple of days. We do see more cloud cover off to the west over into Alabama, into Mississippi, getting down into Louisiana, where actually there's a few scattered showers around New Orleans, Hattiesburg, going down to Mobile, but none of that rain is going to look to make an entrance here in central Georgia, move over from west to east. In fact, our winds are going the exact opposite way. So my thinking is that all of that rain is going to stay put over there, if not move a little bit farther away from us. So here's a look at future view. Over the next 3 days, very, very uneventful. The rest of today should be nice and mostly clear before we start to see all that cloud cover over to the west and northwest of us sag back down to the south a little bit. Now, as it does this during the early morning hours tomorrow, we do have a slim chance of maybe seeing a couple of scattered sprinkles, but it's not going to be really anything too impressive in the way of rain chances. This is just going to be a very brief light shower if you do see anything at all. But whatever cloud cover we have present in the morning, just like today, we are going to see it clear as we go into the afternoon. And that is also going to result in some warmer numbers later on tomorrow afternoon as we have a bit of a ridging pattern setting up. And that's going to lead to a very quick warm up well back above average and back above the 70-degree mark. Then we progress all the way to Christmas Eve, 8 a.m. in the morning. You have any plans early in the day on Christmas Eve? Looking good to go. A few clouds are going to be in the forecast throughout times, even as we go into the afternoon and into the evening, none of which looks to produce anything in the way of rain. And then we go into Christmas Eve night, 9 p.m. as Santa Claus is getting ready to very likely make his way through central Georgia. I don't think Rudolph's going to get much work down here in the southeast United States. Yes, we'll have a few clouds and that may limit visibility just a touch, but take a look at how scarce that cloud cover is. And along with that, we have plenty of gaps. So I imagine Rudolph's going to be taking a bit of a nap as he comes through central Georgia. So if you are eagerly awaiting the arrival Santa Claus and you're wanting to go take a look outside to see if you can maybe see that flashing red light of Rudolph's nose, I don't think you'll have a good chance of really seeing it because, like I said, I think Santa's going to have some pretty good visibility going into central Georgia. And then that takes us all the way to midnight as we transition over into Christmas Day. So we'll talk about your short-term forecast just a little bit first, and then we'll talk about the specifics with some of these numbers. 63 for a high temperature today, mostly or almost completely sunny skies. Then we go into Tuesday where we once again have a mostly sunny afternoon. I guess I forgot to throw a few cloud icons on this. However, your forecast really remains the same. There will be an abundance of sunshine really over the next 3 days, just some occasional passing cloud cover. I did put a 10% chance of rain on Tuesday. That's just to cover the bases. And right now, my thinking is it's really just going to be for the early morning hours. If you are planning on maybe going out hunting or doing something very early in the day, 5 to 6 to 7 p.m., that's really when we're looking at the window for a couple scattered sprinkles. Then 71 as the skies begin to clear and we head into the afternoon. That's already a substantial bump up from Monday into Tuesday, but we just continue to climb the ladder. And finally, your morning low temperatures get on board. Both this morning and tomorrow morning are going to be maybe the coolest feeling time frames that we do have over the next 7 days. And then we see your morning low temperatures get in the neighborhood of around 15 degrees above average, and then a high temperature of 76 degrees as we go into Christmas Eve. So if you have any plans to maybe go out, look at some lights, one of my favorite things to do as a kid was always go to Chick-fil-A, get that peppermint chocolate chip milkshake, and ride around town and look at all those beautiful Christmas lights. It's going to be a perfect night tonight, an even warmer evening tomorrow evening, and then same story, different day as you go into Wednesday on Christmas Eve evening. Then yes, green lights all across the board, and this forecast goes all the way into the end of the week and into the weekend that we will have. Nothing should be getting in the way of rain to maybe complicate that forecast. If you are riding around town, maybe going through one of those drive-through light shows, I think it's going to be great weather for all of that. And the dry stretch of weather will continue to roll on into Christmas Day itself. Here's 3 p.m. on Christmas afternoon. Yes, it is going to be on the warmer side, but your forecast could be a whole lot worse. We'll talk about how this does compare to the records in just a moment. But dry weather and some warm weather looking to be in store for Christmas. And if you lived here for a while, you know that obviously you're no stranger to some of these warm Christmases that we do have. At least we're not talking about some rain in the forecast. And we're also not talking about blistering cold weather. We can take it back to a couple Christmases ago where we had a stretch of maybe a day or two where we didn't even have high temperatures get above the 32-degree mark. That resulted in a lot of folks that maybe ventured out of town. They came back to maybe some pipe problems. We saw a lot of pipes burst because they were below freezing temperature for an extended period of time. That's not going to be of concern throughout this Christmas. It's just not going to necessarily feel like Christmas. Like I said, we tried to order a white Christmas. I think Santa misheard us, and he is sending us a warm Christmas. Dry stretch continues into Boxing Day as we go into Friday afternoon. But then as we go into the weekend, we could see the return of rain chances because number one, we see a couple of these light green dots just scattered about the state of Georgia. Nothing really in the way of very impressive or very substantial rainmakers. However, it is the beginning of maybe some signs of change in your forecast, which are going to come because of this. A frontal boundary beginning to take shape as we go into Sunday morning, but that's to the north of us. I do think the later that we go into the day on Sunday, maybe even as late as the nighttime hours, that's when we could have the chance of a couple scattered showers. But overall, it doesn't really look like a very substantial rainmaker, and it does look like there's not much organization ahead of this frontal boundary that will be moving through because it looks to be coming through during that overnight time frame. If it was to come through during the peak afternoon hours when your temperatures are a good deal warmer, and we actually look to have our fair share of a little bit of moisture to work with as we go into the afternoons each and every day, then that would result in better, more widespread rain chances. But you will feel the impacts of this frontal boundary starting at the beginning of next week. We're forecasting morning low temperatures still somewhere in the 40s as you walk outside on Monday morning, but Monday afternoon, we could see high temperatures only get somewhere in the lower half of the 50s, and then Monday night, Tuesday night, and as you walk out the door both Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning, those are going to be some very, very chilly days with some morning low temperatures maybe getting down into the upper 20s, maybe even just the low 30s, but finally bringing back a bit of that more appropriate feeling weather as we are now officially in the beginning of the winter season and heading into those last couple of days. So if you have plans really early in the day as you get closer and closer to New Year's, make sure that you're bundling up and packing accordingly, especially if you're going out of town. It is going to be chilly, not only here, but if you're traveling up to the north, it is going to be even chillier in nature. It is going to be a pretty frigid environment as we go towards New Year's, but we will warm up pretty quickly after the New Year's holiday and ring in the new year with, once again, what looks to be some above average temperatures. So your afternoon highs are going up into the mid 70s at the peak. I think Christmas Eve has a bit of a better likelihood of being just slightly above the high temperature on Christmas Day. But then we go down just a little bit, somewhere in the low to the lower half of the mid 70s as we roll into the weekend. But like I said, today, this afternoon, is going to be the coolest that we are for the foreseeable future and the closest we get to that average temperature of 60 degrees this time of year. So that's an important number because take a look at 76 and 75 degrees, 16 and 15 degrees above average for this time of year. But that's not just with your afternoon highs, that is also with your morning low temperatures. Starting to feel maybe the most normal that we will see for the foreseeable future, Monday and Tuesday morning. So this morning we did have some areas get well down into the 40s, even some areas that got below 45 degrees. But then 44 degrees as you walk outside tomorrow. Right now, my thinking is that's going to be areas farther down to the south. So kind of the opposite of what you would think. Areas down to the south are typically a little bit warmer this time of year, but I don't think they'll have as much scattered cloud cover as areas farther to the north will have tomorrow morning. So that could create a bit of a temperature difference once again. Then as you go into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings, hovering in the low 50s for morning low temperatures. Yes, this still has the slightest chill to it, something that you will need some light layering for. But take a look at how far above average those numbers are, getting in the neighborhood of around 16 degrees at the most, above your average low of 37 degrees. So above average is definitely the name of the game. But will we break any records is the big question mark. Well, your record for Wednesday, that's going to be Christmas Eve, sits at 77 degrees here in Macon. We set that record back most recently a decade ago in 2015, but before then we first hit it back in 1964. What I have in the forecast is 76 degrees, and we do have some models maybe trying to call for it 77. We'll continue to fine tune that exact number to see if we are going to flirt with a record. But right now, I don't have too much confidence in breaking a record. I have more confidence that we could match that number of 77 on Wednesday. But I do have a little bit of less confidence because your record high temperature for Christmas Day goes up to 78 degrees, set back in 2016 and 2015, so back-to-back years within the last decade here in central Georgia. And then the first time we hit 78 degrees on Christmas Day, that was back in 1982. Well, my forecasted high, like I mentioned, I still have a little bit of less confidence that we will reach a temperature as high as we do on Christmas Eve that we do see on Christmas Day. So that's why 75, a little bit lower than that 76 I have in the forecast for Christmas Eve. And this also creates more of a difference between your record high temperature and what is forecast. I don't think we have too great of a likelihood as it stands currently of matching or even breaking a record on Christmas Day, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we can go ahead and reference this over the past 10 years. I did just mention some of those dates that we set some records. 2015 and 2016, of course, hitting that high temperature of 78 degrees. Then we had a stretch of 3 years in a row, a very cold Christmas in 2017 after record warm ones in 2015 and 16. Somewhere in the 60s for high temperatures as we went into 2018 and 19. A frigid cold Christmas back in 2020, and then 75 degrees. I think this Christmas is going to be more reminiscent of 2021's Christmas. Our morning low value looks to be a little bit warmer, but our afternoon high kind of right there around the 75 degree mark. And then since then, we've had our fair share of below average or maybe just slightly above average Christmases. But when we were above average back in 2023, that resulted in a little bit of rain. So we won't have any of that in the forecast this go around. But we have felt Christmases this warm in the past 10 years. In fact, if we hit 75 degrees, it won't even come close to the warmest Christmas over the last 10 years and the warmest Christmas of all time, of course. So here's your 7-day forecast with all the festive fun graphics on it. A very quick warming trend into those mid 70s as we go into Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. That minuscule chance of a sprinkle, mainly for the morning hours on Tuesday. Not too much confidence in that whatsoever. But we could welcome back a few spotty light showers as we go into Saturday. And then later on Sunday, I do have a better chance of rain in the forecast because we will have more organization with that frontal boundary coming through. And your afternoon highs should be slightly lower as you go into the weekend. Not quite as high as the mid 70s. All in all, it is still a stretch of well above average temperatures, but that will be coming to an end as we pop up Monday on the 7-day forecast. Coming into this time tomorrow, or really as we go later into this evening, Ben will have Monday on the 7-day. And you are going to see a lower high temperature in the forecast, probably somewhere in the upper half of the 50s, maybe even the mid 50s is what I'm anticipating. But then the morning low temperatures are also going to be mighty chilly and get on board with that cooling trend as we go into Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning. And next Wednesday going to be important because that will be New Year's Eve. So it looks like we could flirt with some records right now. I'm not putting too much stock into maybe breaking those records. I think Christmas Eve has the best chance of at least matching that record high temperature, but we'll fine tune the specific numbers as we continue to get closer. We could see the models get on board with another warming trend as we come in tomorrow. We start looking at the data. So continue to stay updated if you are curious about those things in terms of maybe breaking a record on Christmas Day. All in all, what you need to plan for is maybe just wear the bathing suit and some tanning oil. Hope you ask Santa for some of that because it's going to be a very warm forecast. Obviously, that is a bit of a joke. Those temperatures in the pool are definitely going to be too cold to enjoy some of that summertime fun that you would typically enjoy on an 80-degree day or a 90-degree day. But it is going to be a warm Christmas, not a white one, unfortunately. And of course, continue to stay updated on that big cool down that we have in store for next week, because I know a lot of you are going to start to look ahead to your New Year's plans after you get through Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. But yes, warm Christmas. We've been talking about it for quite some time. Looks like it's coming to fruition. Now it's just a question mark about just how warm we are going to be as we head into Wednesday and into Thursday. So that's going to do it for your extended forecast. If you are obviously not tuning in regularly, I know it's a busy week with many friends and family coming into town. You have lots of holiday celebrations to get to. I hope you have a safe and a happy holidays, a very Merry Christmas to you. And of course, if you're not tuning in until you really start to get back in your regular routine, I hope you have a blessed end of the year. And I hope you ring in 2026 just the way you want and start to reach and achieve all those goals that you're setting out to accomplish. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 a.m.